I'm gonna have a hell of a hangover this afternoon, Stu. I don't believe I've stayed up all night drinking since I was an undergrad. Sunrise is worth it, Glenn. Beautiful. You ever been to the Rockies before? Nope. But I'm glad I came. What's gonna happen now? Happen? Well, that's why I got you up here. I told Franny, I'm gonna get Glenn good and drunk and then pick his brains about what happens next. Society happens next. People are coming in dribs and drabs right now, but there may be as many as 8,000 by the first snow of November. Write that down as prediction number 1. We suspect there's an adversary, a dark man that we dream about, west of us somewhere, on the other side of the Rockies. I think he's going to get most of that techies coming to him. We may end up with more people. I like to believe most people are inherently good, and therefore, drawn to good. But he'll end up with the folks who like their trains to run on time. I tell you, Stu, at night, when the sun goes down, I think of the adversary and his team, busy as bees, getting the power back up, dusting the missile silos and tanks and helicopters off, and I get scared. Me too. We got to start getting our shit together, Glenn, or we'll wake up some morning to find that Hardcase waltzing into Boulder with the head of an armed column, complete with air support. Not tomorrow, but maybe by May. So let's start getting it together. You talk, I'll write. We recreate America by means fair and foul. Government comes first. We call a town hall meeting for everyone to attend. And before that, we form an ad hoc organization committee of 7, let's say. You, me, Andros, Fran, Harold maybe. A couple more. We set the agenda for the meeting. Like, first, reading and ratification of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. It's very important that we ratify the spirit of the old society ASAP. Go on. The next item will be that we run the government like a New England township, a perfect democracy, with 7. Call them free zone representatives. And we'll see to it that those 7 are the same as on the ad hoc committee. Uh-huh. What then? We vote that Mother Abigail is to be given absolute veto power over the board. Whether or not she agrees, or will ever use that power, we can't expect to have a workable government here unless she's its titular head. She's the thing we all have in common. The people coming here dreamed of her. She's what makes us feel safe and secure. Mother Abigail was thinking about electricity, and about how Hemingford Home, with its pump and all, was better equipped to handle the end of the world than this fancy house in the Mapleton Hill section of Boulder. They would get the power back on, of course. It was one of the things God had shown her in her dreams. She knew a goodish number of things that were coming. Some from the dreams, some from her common sense. Soon, all the people would stop running around like headless chickens and start pulling together. She wasn't a sociologist like Glenn Bateman, but she knew people always did pull together after a while. The curse and the blessing of the human race was its chumminess. They'll want to form some kind of government, she thought. Probably. They'll want to run it around me. She couldn't allow that. Of course. Much as she would like to, that would not be God's will. She would insist Nick have a part in the running of things, and Ralph, and maybe that Texan Stuart Redmond. They might also want that fat boy she didn't like, Harold. The way he was always grinning, she thought he must be keeping some kind of secret. Some nasty, stinking thing in his heart. If that was the case, she wouldn't say anything. Her place in their councils and deliberations had only to do with the Dark Man. He had no name, although it pleased him to call himself Flag for the time being. She knew that. Also, that on the far side of the mountains his work was already begun. She didn't know his specific plans. They were as veiled as whatever secrets lay in that fat boy's heart. But she was certain of his goal: to destroy all of them. The black man who, unlike God and man, was only able to break and unshape. Antichrist? Call him Anti-Creation. He would have his followers, of course. He was a liar. His father was the father of lies. and he would be like a big neon sign to the cowardly and the wicked. Would they win? Would he? God was a gamesman. It was not for her to know. That will be done. Mother? There's some folks that just got here and would like to say howdy, if you ain't too tired. A pretty good crew, I'd say. Fella in charge named Underwood. Ralph Bretner, who was part of Nick's team. Bring him up, Ralph. That's fine. Good enough, Mother. Will do. Before you go, Ralph, where's Nick? I haven't seen him today, nor yesterday neither. He getting too good for home, folks. He's been out at the reservoir. Him and that electrician, Brad Kitchener, have been looking at the power plant. I was out there earlier. Figure all those chiefs ought to have at least one Indian to boss around. That made Mother Abigail cackle. She did like Ralph, didn't she? Anyway, that fella Redmond came by while we were working to talk to Nick about being on some committee. Nick wrote a couple of pages, but what it came down to was fine by me if it's fine by Mother Abigail. We'll do whatever she wants. What I want is to go on living free like I always have, like an American. I just want my say when it's time for me to have it, like an American. Well, you'll have all that. Nick and Stu asked me to print up 700 flyers for this meeting they're planning. I told them I'd find the biggest hand-cranked mamograph I could. That's fine. Time everyone got done lollygagging around. Speaking of which, people out by the gate getting heat stroke, while you and me chin like there's no tomorrow. I'll bring them in. And Ralph, print 1,000. The new arrivals filed in, a group of 19, and Mother Abigail felt her sin, the mother of sin. Pride, the female side of Satan in the human race, the quiet egg of all sin, pride, which had kept Moses out of Canaan. She had always been a proud woman, proud of the floor she washed on her hands and knees, proud of her children that turned out all right, proud of her life, but she had not made her life, and the mothers of children were the daughters of God. Don't forget. And on this fine morning, as the pilgrims filed through her gate, she thought proudly, it's me they must have come to see. I'm Abigail Fremantle, but most folks around here call me Mother Abigail. You're really real. We're glad to be here. My name's Larry Underwood. I dreamed of you. She thought this man seemed a bit green and apt to bend, but she liked him. I'm Lucy Swan, Mother Abigail. Pleased to make your acquaintance. I dreamed of you too. Would you mind if I asked, 108 last count, though it feels like 216 some day. I'm glad you could come by, Lucy. Then it was the boy and the woman with dark eyes. The boy was all right, but the woman. He's here, she thought. He's come in the shape of this woman. For behold, he comes in more forms than his own, the wolf, the crow, the snake. For Nadine Cross, the moment was one of confusion. An almost swooning sense of revulsion and terror came over her because the old woman could, could see. He's in her, the devil's imp. Nadine thought, all of their power is right here. She's all they got, although they may think differently. Hello, I'm Nadine Cross. I know who you are. This is Joe. Do you know him as well? I don't think Joe's his name any more than mine's Cassandra. And I don't think you're his mom. What's your name, chap? He won't, or can't tell you. I don't think he remembers. Leo Rockway! That's me! I'm Leo! Come away, Joe. She's old. You'll hurt her. She's very old and not very strong. It's not my name. Leo. That's my name. I know who you are. Yes, and I know you. All right, Leo, or whatever you like. Just come away before you tire her more than she already is. As they moved away from her, Mother Abigail's sense of revelation began to grow fuzzy. She became unsure of what she just felt. Why were you like that? Nadine? Can't think. He comes in many shapes. What happened? I was sitting here, waiting to be kowtowed to. No use denying that. But there was something about that woman. Wasn't there? Hey, Mother Abigail. The name's Mark Zellman, from Lowville, New York. I dreamed about you. Then the thread was gone, and she was bantering again. I had me a great nephew lived in upstate New York, town named Rouse's Point, Lake Champion. After Zellman, others came to make their manners, including an old man named Richard Ferris, nicknamed the Judge, who almost made her feel uncomfortable again. She spoke to them all, nodded, smiled, but the pleasure was gone, replaced by the feeling, fading, that she had missed something of great significance and might later be sorry. Nick thought better when he wrote, so we jotted down everything that might be of importance. For instance, the fact that Boulder wasn't like other towns. Oh, there were corpses here, and something would have to be done about them. But it wasn't like the other towns that stank of charnel houses. It was as if, somehow, Mother Abigail had led them to the one city in the United States that was more or less clear of plague victims. Not that it would matter much if they didn't get the power running by the time the first cold snap arrived. If they didn't, Nick was afraid that the gathering flock would begin to slip away, and all the meetings, representatives, and ratifications wouldn't stop them. An unpleasant feeling seemed to be running through the people gathered in Boulder. They were like a bunch of scared kids knocking around in the local haunted house after dark. Luckily, according to Ralph, there wasn't much wrong at the power plant. Possibly, they could have the lights on again by Labor Day. Earlier today, before Ralph went upstairs to sleep, he'd given Nick a copy of the flyer. Ralph had tried to take his name off the flyer and put this fellow Larry Underwood on the committee, but Nick wasn't convinced. He'd have to meet Underwood first. What was holding, so far, was Nick's decision to unilaterally strike Harold Lauder's name from the list of the ad hoc committee members. Nick finished his journaling for the day with 3 words: authority, organization, politics. Nick wasn't knocking Lauder out of the picture because he felt Stu Redman and Glenn Bateman and their team were trying to hog what was really his football. Though hadn't, in a way, he and Tom and Mother and Ralph founded the Boulder Free Zone? Alright, it wasn't just that. It was also, on more than one occasion, Nick wondered if Harold Lauder might not be crazy. It's that grin, he thought. I don't want to share secrets with anyone who smiles like that and looks like he isn't sleeping well at night. Nick's body broke out into goose flesh. He suddenly felt that he was part of some bizarre sewing circle of the human race. He and Redman and Bateman and Mother Abigail and Ralph and the others. And they each had a needle, and perhaps they were working together to make a warm blanket to keep off the winter chill. Or perhaps they had only, after a brief pause, begun to make a large shroud for the human race, beginning at the toes and working their way up. After making love, Stu went to sleep and Franny sat on their porch thinking, I'm starting to show. Not a lot yet, but enough, apparently, to warrant conversation. Earlier, Stu told her about a chat he'd had with Glenn, who advanced the idea, cautiously, that the superflu might still be around and that Fran's baby might, possibly, die upon birth. Count on Glenn Bateman for an unsettling thought or two. What would that mean, though? Well, for one, that all the people left were just an epilogue to the human race, a coda. And Franny couldn't. Your name wouldn't happen to be Fran Goldsmith, would it? Holy God, who? Larry Underwood, looking for Harold Lauder, bearing gifts. Best vintage Bordeaux in this century, as my friend Rudy used to say, God rest his soul. Also, paydays, Harold's favorite. But how did you? That's a story. He told her about leaving New York and heading north to Maine with Rita, then without. He told her about following Harold's signs in a trail of payday wrappers. Over the miles, I started to get a sense of Harold. From the candy wrappers and the carving in that beam that old barn in Algonquin. What carving? Just his initials, H.L.? Larry explained how his group continued to grow as they moved across the country, and how he became their de facto leader. He didn't like the responsibility, he said, and the only way he managed it, whenever he doubted himself, was to ask, "What would Harold do?" Franny was nearly dumbfounded. She wished she could be there when Larry met Harold. What would be his reaction? "He was in my head, Franny, and his voice made me think clearly and saved our bacon more than a few times. And now I'm here, and I brought this wine and candy bars. He'll be pleased. You know, I kind of thought he might be your man." No, not Harold. I should go in now. It's been nice to meet you, Larry. What is it, Fran? Do I have it wrong about Harold? No, just, you made me feel as if I treated Harold very shabbily, and can I be blamed for not loving him the way I do Stu? Of course not. Listen, I'm sorry. I surprised you. I'll go. He's changed. I don't know why or how, and sometimes I think it might be for the better, but I don't really know, and sometimes I'm afraid. Of Harold? Franny didn't answer that one. She thought she had already said too much. Instead, she gave Larry directions to where Harold was living, and the two parted, uneasily. In bed next to Stu, thinking about Harold, thinking sleep might not come tonight, Fran sat up. Something had moved inside her. Oh, glory. She would have woken Stu if the baby was his and not Jess's. She would have shared the moment with him. The next baby, she thought, if there is a next baby. Larry Underwood and Harold Lauder were forgotten. One thought crowded all the others from Franny's mind. Her baby was alive. There were more than 1,000 stars above Harold Lauder, but they weren't lovers' stars. They were haters' stars, stabs from God's ice pick in a sky of black velvet. Wish I may, wish I might, have the wish I wish tonight. Drop dead, folks. Looking better than ever, fitter, his skin cleared up, Harold sat with a book in his lap, a tall volume with marbled blue binding and imitation leather covers. The journal he started keeping after reading Franny's diary. He'd already filled the first 60 pages, margin to margin, no paragraphs. A solid outpouring of hatred like pus from a skin abscess, begging the question, why did Harold Lauder hate so much? Interestingly, there was a time, for an hour or a moment, when he contemplating jettisoning the hatred, considering turning himself into a new Harold Lauder, shaped by the sharp knife of the superflu. He had sensed, more clearly than any of the others, that people in the free zone were not the same as they had been before. In the end, though, Harold knew that the seize of the new opportunity for change would have been tantamount to murdering himself. The ghost of every humiliation he had ever suffered cried out against that choice. And meanwhile, there was a dark carnival in the desert, Ferris wheels revolving over a black landscape, a sideshow filled with freaks like himself, a discordant music calling to Harold. In the free zone society, he could only be Harold Lauder. Over there, in the west, he could be a prince. By starlight, Harold wrote in his journal. He would be leaving soon, a month or two, and then he would head out west and spill his guts about the place. He was sure to be on the Free Zone committee, and oh, the secrets he would be privy to. He would be welcomed and rewarded by the man in charge, there with a hate Cadillac, and he and Flag would drive back together and kick this settlement apart like an anthill. But first, he would settle with Redman, who had lied to him and stolen his woman. I am on a great adventure.